Welcome to Towers, a Metazoo podcast. My name is Ester, and today I fulfill a promise. I give you part 3 of the Earth Tower Brewing. Now, Earth Tower is over at this point. I had a version of this episode partially recorded. I'm throwing it out. I'm doing a new version. Still in the spirit of that, but I'm going to also give you the context of what happened at Earth Tower. I know the new thing is usually like what people want, but because I am not going to be sharing all of my decks in the future, I wanted to complete this thought process. I think if you're a new or intermediate player and you want to take your game to the next level, this is at least a level you can following these 3 episodes, following the deck lists in them. So let's do a quick rewind because it's been some weeks. Earth is a format full of heavy hitters and big defenders. Taehihan is the star of the show, a 1-drop that swings for 145 and reduces the cost of beastie giants by 3 aura. And that 3 aura does not discriminate. That could be water, dark, forest, whatever works for you, which allows you to splash other giants without worrying about their costs. We've determined that Cardiff Giant is a must-play. With Taehihan's out, it's a 2 cost and it reduces all of your Earth Beasties by 1, meaning you can throw Taehihan's out for free and you can get a lot of Beasties out for 1 or 2. I talked about liking Armadillo Man and taking it over Mountain Boomer for its great defense, its paralyze on attack, and its destroyed effect, which allows you to equip it to another beastie. If they're declared as an attack, or if you declare them as a defender, you can throw it into the cemetery, end combat. And then Cement Worms, a page I was not initially planning on playing, but as I went through tests, it was just worth getting those early Cement Worms out. But Earth Tower was not just any old tournament, it was kind of a release event. Set 6, aka Native, dropped on Friday. The tournament happened on Saturday and then Sunday. Pre-release events happen as early as that Tuesday from what I saw, and teams, stores, and partners opened cases of this stuff to supply their players with what they needed. I was keeping track of spoilers on the daily. I was messaging people who were opening boxes on Monday to try to get details on a few Earth cards that I had seen blurry pictures of just to see if they were going to be playable. And I was scouring eBay and the Facebook groups to see what other people were trying to purchase early. Something that we'll probably do a whole episode on, but you should generally do going into a tower, scouting out what other people are after, and then playtesting them yourselves because people often jack up the prices of pages that aren't actually good, but people think will be good and are rare. It's always better to just have the pages in your collection to begin with, but this is a key part of research. So what pages was I looking at? Well, for starters, let's talk about Giant's Blood. We were already playing Armadillo Man, which turns into an equipment, and Giant's Blood is another equipment. Giant's Blood costs 2, and it kind of solves the Power Up Red problem. Power Up Red is a great page. It costs 3 neutral, and it ups your beastie's attack and LP by 100, making them very difficult to remove. The issue is they take a precious non-aura slot, and in this format, things are hitting hard enough you don't need the power-up red, but it would be nice. Giant's Blood takes care of that. It's an Earth page, so we can put it in our main spellbook without having to worry about ratios. If you equip it to a beastie, it is going to increase their LP by 80 and remove all traits, preventing them from getting traits. However, if you add it to a giant, it increases the LP and the attack by 80. And does not remove their traits. So this thing is almost a power-up red on giants, and it's better if you're running a specific page because it's an equipment, whereas power-up red just goes under the beastie. As soon as I saw this, I wanted it. With my spellbook, I had Taehihan's. If I could equip a Giant's Blood to them, that meant they could block Cement Worms and other medium-ranked swingers. On top of that, I could equip it to, say, a Cardiff Giant or another giant in my spellbook, and they're going to be very powerful. But the other thing I liked about Giant's Blood was the remove traits effect. I liked the idea of using Giant's Blood as a removal spell. This isn't something that would necessarily occur to you from the get-go, but if you have a beastie in front of you that has a lot of heavy traits and you have plenty of damage you can do, but you're having a difficulty getting around those traits, you could equip the Giant's Blood to the enemy beastie, and now you just have to do damage to it. For example, the new Piazza bird, which we'll talk about, has stone skin, it's flying, which puts it out of reach of most of the beasties, but it only has 100 LP. And if you can put a Giant's Blood on it, that's now 180. Swinging 2 of really any beastie will take it out. So I knew if I could, I wanted to get a hold of Giant's Blood, and I was very relieved when I saw that it came in a non-hollow slot. Next, we need to talk about the 2 giants. As soon as people saw these giants, they were pretty confident they were going to be a presence at Towers, and there was one of them I was after in particular. And that giant is Zalvitz. Zalvitz is nuts. It costs 6, 2 of the cost is dark, but if you remember, we're probably going to have Tehihans on board, so that's 3 Earth. It has 170 LP, and no defender trait, nothing that increases LP, which does make it vulnerable to a number of pages. It has the Fear trait, which is something I really loved in Water Tower on things like Bloody Bones or Fog Hog. I have to be honest, I did play this page. My main misplay throughout the day was not rolling its Fear trigger, because I wasn't playing it for its Fear trigger. The thing I was playing it for was its damage. This Death Valley giant has a 30 attack bonus to Desert and a 30 attack bonus with Mountains. Both of those terras are in play. They're both tripled, so that's going to be plus 90 on each. That means on a base, this thing is hitting for 240. But that's not even the best part of it. Its attack, size over matter, deals plus X damage, where X is the total amount of bonus LP this beastie has. So, if it has plus 10 LP, it has plus 10 attack. It has Tribal Boost Giant, which means for every giant on the field, including your opponents, it's getting plus 10 LP, plus 20 attack, because Tribal Boost gives plus 10 attack, plus 10 LP, but then it's getting the additional attack for that LP. And if you're clever, you might be thinking of that page I just mentioned, Giant's Blood, which is going to increase its LP and attack by 80 each. But that means on this guy, Giant's Blood, because it adds 80 LP, that's also going to translate to an attack, means it's getting plus 80 LP and plus 160 attack. So this thing is swinging for 400 damage. It ignores the effects of flight. It's immune to dark spells, which means anybody who is thinking of splashing dark pages like Hateful Demise are not going to be removing it, which means they're probably just not going to play Hateful Demise. It's a beast. Like I said before, its main vulnerability is its LP. At 170, it's pretty easy to knock out. But this thing was a must-add to my spellbook. Now, a giant I like to think of as its rival is Odzianza. Instead of dark, Odzianza is a water page. It costs 6, just like the previous beastie, but it's 2 water, 4 earth. Once again, we have Tehihans out, more than likely, and so that's going to be 3 earth. It has a neat Terra effect that I think will be a cool thing to play around with in Constructed, but you're not going to use it in the towers. It also has Tribal Boost Giant, which is going to help it take out Zalvitz, because as its LP is going up, Odzianza's damage is going up. It is a Water Earth page, so it does get an attack boost against Earth pages. It's going to do an extra 20 damage to them. But the main reason I think people liked the look of this page was the defense. It has Defender and Stone Skin. So with that Defender, it's going to double its LP on your opponent's turn, which means it can absorb a lot of damage. And on top of absorbing that damage, it's going to be swinging back at your opponent. So this thing is a wall that your opponent has to dedicate resources to. I was not planning on playing this page, but I was an early defender of it. People did not like it as much, but I argued with Defender and with the attack we already had on board with things like Tehihan that this was a good page and that people should take a look at it. Between these 2 giants, the tower format was changed. Even though you can only put 3 of each in a spellbook, they just immediately trumped Elder Matlocks to me, which was something I was running. And spoiler alert, they were very present at the Earth Tower. Now, something we didn't really see until pretty late in the game, I would say Tuesday is when these pages were clear, were the Matlocks support cards. There was a Matlocks Cave card that, if I remember correctly, you can play it as a special Terra, and it's going to boost Matlocks. I was curious if this was going to be good enough to bring Matlocks to the forefront, but I did not have enough time to test. I'll tell you a bit about my travel stories in the next episode, but I ended up going to New York City a day earlier, and the day I was planning on packing and doing some last-minute research and recording this episode, there was a release event that unexpectedly popped up. I think something you want to avoid when it comes to towers is making last-minute spellbook changes unless you're very confident and you've done a lot of testing. Generally, the spellbook you're the most familiar with is going to serve you better, especially in an environment where a lot of people have only been playing these spellbooks for a week or two, and you knowing yours better than theirs means you're less likely to make mistakes, and mistakes can lose you matches, and often do. We got to talk about Piazza Bird. The hype around the new Piazza Bird was through the roof. People were having great difficulty pulling it. Kind of the narrative on Monday was that fusion auras were going to be extremely rare. Piazza Bird is not worth playing without 2 magma fusion aura, and rarer than the fusion auras were Piazza Birds. Now, we've had more time to open up product at this point, and Piazza Bird is not necessarily rarer than any of the native 19, as they've called the holo-only cards for this set. But it is still fetching a premium, and it certainly was going into the tower. Why do we like Piazza Bird? It comes in and it has flash. You roll, if you get a heads, you point to a beastie and say, you don't get to attack. Now imagine if they have one of the new big giants who can swing at you for 400 and they don't get to attack, that could lose them the game. It has flying, which puts it out of reach of most beasties outside of that dark giant, and stone skin. So even with 100 LP, you can't really take it out without combat damage. It's getting plus 40 to desert and plus 40 to mountain, so it's 120 to each. And it gets plus 80 damage if magma is within eyesight. The magma fusion aura counts for that, and you're not playing this card without the magma fusion aura. So its base attack is doing 160. And then you're adding all that extra damage. This thing's swinging for 400. You do a lightning in the bottle, and the game's over. If you can get it out. Another nice thing about it is you can contract a flame or an earth spell from your cemetery for 3 at less aura. I wasn't anticipating a lot of spells. But the other thing, something I didn't realize until my final match, was the amount of tribes that it can destroy. So you may destroy a beastie bird, caster, dragon, humanoid, or snake. Dragon was neat because if they play a Piazza first and then you play yours, you can just ice their Piazza. But it'd been a while since I had been really paying attention to the tribes of my pages, and Armadillo Man is a beastie humanoid, which means when Piazza hits the table, on top of doing flash and all of the other nasty things, you can just get rid of an Armadillo Man. I was not planning on playing Piazza for a number of reasons. 1, I did not think I was going to get 2 magma aura. 2, even at 400 damage, I don't like how difficult it is to cast. I don't like how expensive it is. My pages all cost 1, 2, and 3. Ideally 2 if I had Cardiff Giant out. This is a little top heavy for me. I'll talk about my matches in a later episode, but I found that Piazza Bird was not winning games. It was just a really nice finisher. But so is Zalvitz, so what are you going to do? And there was one other card that I was taking a look at that is an older page. Not that much older. It comes out in Seance. And I had mentioned it before, but this is Tommyknockers. Tommyknocker is an Earth Spirit Beastie. On the surface, a lot of people see its Cairn play. It ups Cairn counters, and I wasn't running Cairns, and I think people decided they either were or weren't running Cairns, and that determined if they wanted to do Tommyknockers. But Tommyknockers has 2 really nice things with it. 1, it's got the Spirit trait, which means it cannot be targeted with attacks. And because I didn't anticipate people playing a lot of spells because there was so much stone skin, I was not worried about them launching something at Tommyknocker. The other thing I liked about Tommyknocker, especially with the spellbook I was working with, is its equipment play. Tommyknocker's power allows you to unequip an equipment from a page and equip it to another page. If it's not a legal target, you can throw it away. Because I anticipated Armadillo Man being a big factor, the idea of stealing my opponent's Armadillo Man was really fun. And then you add Giant's Blood, and now I really like Tommyknocker, because if they play Giant's Blood, you can just steal that. On top of that, say you have 3 giants but only 1 Giant's Blood, and you have a couple of Tommyknockers. You can swing with your first giant, and then you can use Tommyknocker's power to move the Giant's Blood to your next giant, swing with that, and then you can use your second Tommyknocker to move the Giant's Blood over to your third giant and swing with that. 3 Giant's Bloods for the price of a couple Tommyknocker attacks. The thing that ended up being the best part of it was its LP put it out of the range of being killed by things like cement worms, so you could use it as a wall for cement worms. I really liked the idea of putting an Armadillo Man on it. Because it can't have attacks declared against it, that meant you just had a free super blocker. If they're coming at you with a Piazza Bird for 400 damage, and you had an Armadillo Man on a Tommyknocker, you could just leave it standing, defend, throw the Armadillo Man away, none of that damage goes through. The issue with Tommyknockers is the 1 Earth, 1 Spirit. With 2 Prism Auras in your spellbook, I don't think it's worth playing. At least I didn't feel confident enough to play it. And variants can be brutal at these events, and I was still trying to figure out what my aura ratios were. I did not want to put a Spirit Aura in my spellbook just to run Tommyknockers. That would not have been good. But there were new Fusion Auras, and there were the Spirit Fusion Auras. If you have 2 Prism Auras and you have 2 Spirit Auras, that also makes it worth throwing in a Possessed Aura, because now you have 5 sources of Spirit in your spellbook, and Tommyknockers is very playable. There's a whole story behind this, but I managed to open a few boxes. I managed to pull 2 Fusion Auras. One was a Spirit, one was a Light, which I traded to someone at the shop for a Spirit. I played Tommyknockers. I built my whole deck around them, and it went very well. Now, there was one page that I would not have been able to talk about even if I wanted to, because we did not know this page existed until like Friday, really. And that's Kiwaka. Kiwaka is a release event deck beastie. It's a giant, it's 2 Earth and 3 Forest, which with Teihan means it's 2 Earth. And why do we like this page? I mean, it's got Tribal Boost Giant, that's good. It has a really neat power, you can fatigue it, and up to 3 BCs are dealt 20 damage. Its attack is doing 120, and has 220 LP. But the main thing is it has Fleet. A 2-cost beastie with Fleet in this format is bonkers. Release event decks did not go out to people early. The first time I saw one was on a Friday, and the first time I saw this card was in my first match. Had I known it existed, I would have tried to obtain one, and I would have put it in my spellbook because it would have just made my spellbook better. But that's the nature of this event. New pages, new interactions. The product is getting to people at different times. You're going to see some stuff for the first time, and I certainly did. So those were the pages I was looking at. Those were the pages a lot of us were looking at. There were other Earth pages, but you can kind of tell based on what I'm talking about what the highlights were. I'm going to post the spellbook I was going to run with until these cards were spoiled and until I obtained the ones that I wanted. I really liked it. It ran really smooth. Something that kind of surprised people was I wasn't running that many lightning in a bottles and I was running 1 bookmark, but I found that those pages gave me just the edge I needed to sneak by my opponent. The biggest change I would have made last minute had I kept this spellbook was I would have removed the Graveyards Mud and put Tehihans in their place. But other than that, I was really happy with it. And I'm really happy I didn't run it because I think this spellbook would have been really good, but it would not have taken me as far as my final spellbook did. Now, if you want to know what that final spellbook is, if you want to hear all of the tech and strategy behind the thing that took me undefeated day 1 and got me into my first top cut, tune into the next episode because we are digging deep into that. And as a little treat, a couple nights before the tower, I recorded my final notes of the native cards I had obtained, what I was putting in, what my worries were, and my last minute spellbook changes. Testing. I think that'll do it. Sorry for the lack of episodes. I had planned on doing several more before the tower, but a series of events occurred. The first, the Afterlife team contacted me and let me know that Cardboardia down in Murrieta, Southern California, was going to do a pre-release event. So I obviously had to go to that. I pre-ordered a couple of boxes. And it took me almost 3 hours to get there just because of when it was on Tuesday. So there's a lot of traffic between Los Angeles, Long Beach, and I ended up driving through a national forest, which was beautiful, and past, Lake Elsinore. It was a very pleasant drive, but I was quickly running out of time, but it ended up being worth it. When I got there and I opened my 2 boxes, I got the Giants I wanted. I got a play set of Giant's Blood, which was something I was looking to play. But better yet, my first box, I opened one of the Fusion Auras, the Spirit Earth Fusion Aura, which was at the top of my list. If I could pick any fusions to get, it would have been that and the one with Forest. As I mentioned before, the Forest one just helps with consistency with growth. And then in my second box, I pulled another Fusion Aura, this time an Earth Light Fusion Aura. Now, that wasn't something I would play. I don't have any light pages I really want to run, and just on the off chance my opponent does, I don't want to play a fusion aura just for fun and then have them have a possessed aura and benefit from the light aura there. So I wasn't going to use it, but people started rolling in. I saw a lot of people from Long Beach, which is the first tournament I ever went to. It was really fun catching up with folks. And the first person I played against said that he had pulled an Earth Spirit fusion aura as well. And I asked if he was interested in trading, and he says, well, it's at home. And we got talking, we played our game. It was fun. Played a couple games, but partway through the event, I was like, hey, not to have a stranger invite themselves to your block, but if you are interested in trading, I will drive to your block, even though it's, late at night, just because I knew one spirit fusion aura would be enough to try to run Tommy knockers, but two would really make it consistent. And by the end of the night, he's like, yeah, let's do it. So I was very excited. Not only did I get the cards I wanted, then I had two fusion auras, which I was not anticipating, just because watching the pull rates, they're not incredible. Like if you open 2 boxes, your odds are not great. And especially to get playable ones, because if you pull a fusion aura, you have 9 different options. So I got those. And then the other part was I am friends with a number of flight attendants and have lived with flight attendants. And one of my old roommates offered to give me some of her guest passes to get to New York, because I originally didn't think I was going to make it to Earth Tower, just because I didn't think I would qualify. And so I took her up on it. But the thing with standby guest passes is if the plane is full, you don't get on the plane. And I'm looking at flights to get to New York, and if I leave on Thursday, I can arrive by like late Thursday night or Friday morning. And I did end up getting a ticket to the gala. I got an invite. And so I wanted to make sure I was there on Friday. I talked to her and she was like, yeah, it's looking pretty full on Thursday. Is there a way you can go on Wednesday? And so I rescheduled some stuff on Wednesday. I said, sure, I'm going to go. So then another day that I would have spent editing and messing with decks and going through my cards was gone, because now it's Tuesday night. Like I got home at 12:30, and now not only do I have these new cards to work into my deck, I need to grab all of the cards I could possibly want to work into or mess with or test with from my collection. And then I needed to pack and do laundry and be ready to go to New York the next day. And I won't bore you with the details of the journey, but I was the last person on the wait list, and there was one seat left for my first flight, and this same thing happened with my second flight. So I barely made it here. And if you're ever looking at using standby tickets in the future, apparently if you have a layover and that flight fills up, you just get stranded. You have to buy a ticket back. So it was nerve-wracking, but I made it here to my buddies in Jersey City. We're just right on the edge of the river, so very close to the gala where I'm staying in Brooklyn for the actual tournament. And I'm a night owl. I'm on East Coast time. It's 4 a.m. here in New York, but 1 a.m. where I'm from, and I don't normally go to bed till about 3. I got some sleep when I got there, so I'm just going through my deck. And the big thing that's kind of haunted me throughout the day is if I wanted to go from 8 to 9 aura. And I ultimately decided to do it. My current aura spread is I'm running 2 prisms. I'm running those 2 spirit fusion auras. And then I added my possessed aura into the main deck, because now that I have the fusion auras, I'll benefit from that. And also, I've been watching these teams crack just case after case of cards, and a lot of them are going to have fusion auras. So if they're playing Forest, which I think is likely, especially if I make it to top cut, I'll be able to play Growth, even if I don't have the fusion aura for that. And then it's, last minute deck changes. So Giant's Blood really changed the game for me. That is an equipment that adds 80 LP to a regular beastie and removes all of their traits and prevents them from getting traits. But if you attach it to a giant, that's plus 80 LP and plus 80 attack damage. And for the giant I'm running, the Dark Earth Giant, he gets plus attack for all of his bonus LP. So if you put Giant's Blood on him, he gets 80 for the Giant's Blood. And then because he has 80 bonus health from that equipment, he gets plus 160. So now he's swinging for 400 damage, which is just an absurd amount. So I knew I needed to work in a playset of that giant. You can have up to 3. So I got rid of Elder Matlocks. I got rid of an Armadillo Man. Actually got rid of 2 Armadillo Men. So I'm down to 2 Armadillo Men, just because at this point it's like, okay, I like them as a defensive option, as a paralyzer, and also just as an equipment. But the big thing was Tommyknockers. I was like, where am I going to put these Tommyknockers? Well, conveniently, I'd been running 4 Cement Worm, and you can have up to 4 Tommyknocker. And the main reason I like Cement Worm is for the evasion. If your opponent gets ahead of you on turn 2, being able to play something that they can't attack with a Tehihan has been really good. And then there's an extra bonus of you can lock down their aura, but the evasion was what I was after. Not to mention it can then take out other worms or try to. But with Tommyknocker, it has Spirit, which is also evasion, and better yet, it does not get hit by Earthquake or Burrowed Beasties. It has 80 LP and 100 damage. 80 LP means that if you're facing Cement Worms and you don't want your aura to get locked down, I can leave my Tommyknocker up, and then if you swing at me, I can block with Tommyknocker, I'll still have 20 LP left, and then I'm going to kill your Cement Worm. But the main thing with Tommyknocker is its power. So having Spirit and swinging for 100 is really good on its own. Like, I'm happy with that. Water Tower really taught me the value of chip damage, of not just playing beasties that can knock out other beasties you're going to run into, but just beasties that can damage your opponent. But the big thing with Tommyknocker is it can steal equipment. You can fatigue it to use its power, which allows you to take an equipment from a page and put it on another page. And this was already pretty good with Armadillo Man, because Armadillo Man turns into an equipment. And so you can try to destroy their Armadillo Man. In theory, they're going to put it on one of their pages, and then you can steal it with Tommyknocker if you want. So not only will they not be able to prevent combat, now you can prevent combat. And I also like the option of putting the Armadillo Man on a Tommyknocker and then having the Tommyknocker up as a blocker. If you have Tehihans and you have bigger giants that are doing more damage, what's great with Armadillo Man is they don't need to have an attack declared against them. They can be declared as a defender, and that Armadillo Man effect is going to work. But then you factor in Giant's Blood, which is also an equipment. Armadillo Man, I think, was already going to be worth potentially running Tommyknockers, but Giant's Blood is incredible. But also, I was debating on how many to put in my spellbook. I ended up putting 3. I cut a Tehihan, I cut a couple things. I put 3 in there. But at these higher tables, I think anybody who gets access to set 6 is probably going to be putting Giant's Blood in their spellbooks. On top of that, there's a new Matlocks card that's really good. So I think some people are going to run Matlocks. There's going to be a lot of reasons to run Giant's Blood. And now with my Tommyknockers, I can steal their Giant's Blood. So if you're using Armadillo Man as a defense, I can steal that from you. If you play a Giant's Blood, I can steal that from you. So not only are you down, the 2 aura you spend, I'm up, and you can stack Giant's Blood. So if I get my Dark Giant out, it's swinging for 240 normally, if there are no other Giants on the board, because that's Tribal Boost. And then I can put a Giant's Blood on it. Now it's swinging for at least 400. If I put another one, that's 560. The game's over. And it means they don't get their Giant's Blood. And so now my current build, I was pretty confident in the consistency because I really liked my past spellbook. I'll post it when I get home. It just was consistent, which is what I was looking for. And so being able to replace 4 Cement Worms with 4 Tommyknockers, both of those are 2 drops, helps. Cement Worms are a little easier to play because while I have 5 sources of spirit in my spellbook, 8 or 9 of earth is better. But still, it's very playable. And then just working on using the Tommyknockers to do damage and keep the board clear normally, and then when the opportunity strikes, stealing their equipment. So a few things I'm planning on doing with Giant's Blood. Say I have 2 of these giants out, and I only have 1 Giant's Blood, and it's equipped to one of those giants. I can swing with that giant, and then with Tommyknocker, I can move the Giant's Blood to the other giant who hasn't attacked yet, and then attack with that. And in that way, I get the benefit of both of them. But the other thing is there's a big, scary beastie, which is the new Piazza Bird. It's very difficult to pull. I've seen people try to sell them for $500 online, but I do know a number of these teams have pulled Piazza Bird, and based on looking at the market, which I'll talk about in a moment, people are planning on running this. They have their Magma Fusion Aura. I don't even know how much it does. So much damage. It has plus 40 to 2 different Terra bonuses, so that's 240 just for that. And then I think its attack does 60 or 80, and then if Magma is in Eyesight, it does another 60 or 80. And you're only going to play Piazza Bird. It costs 2 Earth and 2 Flame if you have that Fusion Aura, so it's just going to be swinging for crazy amounts of damage, and you need an answer for that. So I have 2. One is my Dark Giant ignores flight and can do enough damage. Piazza Bird does not have any bonus LP. It just has 100 LP. But the other is using Giant's Blood as a removal spell. If you remember what I said before, Giant's Blood, when equipped to a non-giant BC, removes all of their traits. So they're going to get plus 80 LP, but plenty of my stuff can knock that out. And that's a way to get rid of Piazza Bird. And I can apply that to other things too. You can put Giant's Blood on anything that has a trait you don't like, and LP is not that hard to deal with. Just to remove them. So I'm running 3 of them because I figure I'll probably use a couple of my beasties, and also having them as a removal spell is nice. And then my archive is something I've just been going back and forth on. For one, going up to 9 aura meant I was putting another page in my archive. So I have a number of situations, but the main thing that changed is I added 3 Morpheus, because if I'm dealing with a deck that just has a lot of big scary beasties, if they don't have Tommyknockers but they are running the Giant and Giant's Blood, I can just Morpheus it, and then it's sitting there giving me tribal boost and not bothering anybody. Same thing with Piazza Bird. Both of those have stone skin, so it's going to be pretty difficult for them to get the sleep off of themselves. I don't have as much stone skin in my deck anymore, barely any, but they have a good amount of LP. I don't know how many people are going to be running aggressive spells, but on top of putting in those Morpheus, I put in 2 Cursed Contract, which is the spirit counter spell. And so if I run into a deck that is going really hard on spells and it's hard for me to deal with, I have a counterspell option. And the rest I'm still fiddling around with. I'm going to try to go to bed in a minute here, but I'm just trying to, get my sequencing right and everything. But the other thing I'm doing is paying attention to the market. And this is something you should do before, really leading up to a tower. But especially in this case, anytime there's a release event going, because I know that these other teams, they're running a Matlock's Cave deck just to see how it does. They're running a Piazza Flame heavy deck. They're running all these different options, which I don't have time to do. I didn't think I was going to get any fusion auras, and so I have just enough time to focus on this spellbook and really refine it. But they will have not only access to those pages, they're also going to be training with them. I imagine they've been doing that since the spoilers have dropped. My one hope for that is, I know a lot of these teams are cracking, a number of cases. At the same time, you're not guaranteed to get the fusion auras you want, and I can kind of see what people are trading for. So I'm paying attention to the market. People really want the flame fusion aura, and they really want Piazza Bird. So I'm going to be counting on seeing that with some of these top decks. They also really want Spirit aura, which good for me. I haven't seen a lot of action for Water Aura, which was something I was anticipating, but I think they're just also not selling them, so I think they're just keeping those. Same thing with the Forest Aura. That's, a great card, and I hope a bunch of people have it and play it so that I can use my Possessed Aura to play Growth, because, God, I want to play Growth. I also have a bookmark in my archive in case, I'm just getting unlucky or the game's going too fast, so I can swap the Growth for a bookmark, so I at least have something I can use. And also another good thing to do is go on the Discord and see what kind of questions people are asking, because that'll give you an idea of what they're playing. But I'm going to wrap this up and try to get some sleep. Not too optimistic, but I'm at least going to close my eyes. And then tomorrow I'm heading to Brooklyn to get set up near the tournament, and then putting on my suit and heading off to this gala. And then we'll see how late we are at that, because then we got the event the next day. Metazoo's got a new Play Network up that looks very fancy. It has rankings, though it does not look like it kept any of the previous tournaments, so we've kind of lost a lot of the Water Tower details. Once again, 2 per spellbook, that blog is really good and has documented Water Tower pretty thoroughly, which I've been just going through all of the top 8 decks of Water Tower, mostly to get an idea of how much water were they running, how much aggression versus how much defense. It's a different ball game with Earth, but there's certain things, there's only one deck in the top 8 that was running 8 aura. A few were running 9, and most of them were running 10, and that's with all of the card draw. Granted, things are more expensive. I don't have anything in my spellbook that costs more than 3, so we're going to see. Honestly, the biggest thing I'm worried about is just aura screw. It seems like every time I separate my deck in order of which it's going to be listed so that I can go through and make alterations, my first 3 hands are just Clump City, and we need to have our spellbook in order when we present it to the judge. What I do now is I do pile shuffling, so I make 7 piles, to shuffle everything out. And then I do 7 or 8 mass shuffles. And normally from game to game, that does me well. But it's not enough to break up a deck that is in order. And even if I then do that again and again, it doesn't necessarily sort it out. What I have found is then if I play a game or two, then it's running smoother. But I'm counting on Aura Screw, but I also don't think that many people are going to be running 10 Aura at this event. So if I'm having trouble with Aura, they probably are too. We're going to see. I'm really excited to run this Spirit Spellbook, and I'm excited to see how it does. I've only had a chance to run it against my original Spellbook once, just because I don't have internet right now, but it was definitely a problem. Like, having Tommyknockers just steal your stuff is difficult to deal with, but I'm assuming a lot of the teams are going to be running the same build, and so we're going to have Tommyknockers snatching things from Tommyknockers. It's going to be very interesting. Yep, I'm going to go try to wrap this up. And I'll record a bunch of stuff at the tournament. I'll probably have a couple of like diaries like this. And then when I get home, we'll do some proper episodes with proper editing and, sound design and all of that. I hope I meet a bunch of you at this tournament. Retroactively, I hope you said hi. If not, there's more coming up. I hope that was illuminating with those notes. I know this is a longer episode. Definitely check out the next one. It's probably going to be the crown jewel of this season. And then look forward to the following episodes because we're getting into more tower strategy. There are a lot of episodes of this show I could make, and so I'm prioritizing the ones that I think will actively be useful to you. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the next one. Towers, a Metazoo podcast, was created by me, Ester Ellis. The cover art was made by Chandler Candela. Music by the Heatley Bros. More details in the description. Want to say hello? Follow the show on Instagram at Towers Podcast. Send me an email at towersgamepodcast@gmail.com and say hi in Metazoo's Discord servers. Many of the figures in Metazoo originate in indigenous lore, and I think it's important for me to acknowledge that I make this podcast on the traditional lands and home of the Tongva Nation. This game presents us with a rich opportunity to get in touch with the living cultures that surround us. And I hope you can take a moment to reflect on the history of the land you stand on and the figures and the cards you play.